You are recording.
Fantastic. All right, I will call the March 16th, 2026 Land Use Review Board meeting to order. I want to recognize that Chair Hurley is present, but she has asked me to facilitate the meeting. Well, first of all, roll call. Sarah Had present. Janet?
Janet Hurley, Chair, present, but not 100%. So thank you, Sarah, for taking the helm.
Kristen?
Kirsten Sultan, board member present.
Alex?
Alex Weinhagen. Hello, everyone.
And Brooke?
Brooke Dingeldine, board member.
All right, perfect. That's all of us. Any agenda updates? All right, hearing none, no agenda updates. We'll move to opportunity for public to comment on non-agenda items. I see we do have a couple of members of the public with us. I'll give a minute for somebody to come off mic if they would like to say something, public comment on non-agenda item. All right, it appears that we do not have any public comments on non-agenda items. I'll move on to the consent agenda items for March 9th minutes. I did send around clarification / correction from Wilson to Williston. Any other changes to March 9th minutes? I'd entertain a motion. Kirsten?
I'll make a motion to approve the March 9th minutes, including the revisions mentioned by Sarah and any others as discussed here.
I'll second.
Oh, that was a close one, but I think Brooke beat you, Alex. Okay, so second by Brooke. All those, or any other corrections or discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
It looks like we're unanimous. Janet, were you voting though?
No, I will abstain.
All right, so 4 ayes from Kirsten, Alex. Well, let me just do a quick roll call.
Yeah, I think you have to.
Yep. Sarah Had voting aye. Alex, how do you vote?
Aye.
Brooke?
Aye.
Kirsten?
Aye.
And Janet?
I abstain.
All right, thank you all. Motion passes. Discussion on possible action on the Lamoille County Regional Planning Commission response letter. Brooke?
Gosh, give me just a sec. I unfortunately just closed the window. Sorry.
That's all right. I think we had another person join us. Is there any other public comment on non-agenda items? We went over that earlier, but if anybody has any public comment on non-agenda items? Still not seeing anyone. So Brooke, when you're ready.
Great. All righty, I'll bring up this is showing as version 4, and I will go over the new changes. Janet sent some information through on goal 10 with regard to earth resources. And so I've added some information to that section. We'll get to that. But how would folks like to proceed? We went through most of the statutory sections, but when we got to the village centers, or we jumped to the village centers to be sure that we talked about the 2 that were had some concerns by board members. We did not then go back through all of those other village center areas where there were a number of advisory suggestions. So I wanted to know what the board's pleasure was in terms of going through items today. Would you like to do it with raising issues that we'll jump to, or would you like me to go through those village center designations and other flu areas?
I'm comfortable just hitting on items that folks would like to focus on rather than trying to do it in a systematic way. But if people are more amenable to having you review things more systematically, I'm fine with that. But I spent time to look this over. I just have some specific items.
Anybody disagree, or would they like to proceed per Alex's? All right, I think Brooke will proceed per Alex's request.
Why don't you folks let me know where you'd like me to jump to? Alex, you want me to go to the PGA areas?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, great.
Brooke, can we just look at goal 10 and get that out of the way
Oh,
on the
sure.
way?
Let's do, yeah, that makes the most sense. Let's do that first. Hang on just a minute for me. Sorry if I make you all seasick here. Okay. So goal 10 had to do with the working lands, water resources, natural environment, but there was an area that I neglected to describe or talk about, and it's very important, particularly for Lamoille County. So Janet mentioned this and suggested that we add the plan introduction includes a discussion of the county's earth resources, particularly sand and gravel and sand deposits, and encourages the wise use of these resources with thoughtful remediation and reuse of sand and gravel pit sites. I then added a couple sentences to expand a little bit to be sure that we described it, because this is a very important area to be sure is detailed, I think, due to the importance of it in the area. So this section is a summary of the important descriptors within the plan. And then I called out the additional reference pages for the earth resources sections, where including the action item and further discussions in the land use section. And then Janet was suggesting that we put in a requested revision, and that is revised goal 10 section of the checklist to address the use of earth resources, remediation of extraction sites, and reuse of former extraction sites.
If I can just explain, I think goal 10 is pretty specifically about earth resources and not generally about natural resources. And particularly the earth resources. And that's why I felt like this was missing both from our response, but also from the statutorily required report, which is the checklist. So that's why I thought it needed to be a required revision for the checklist.
So the plan, you feel that the plan content is adequate, but that it needs to be described and called out in the checklist
Yes.
descriptors. Okay.
Yes.
Kirsten?
So I just have a question about the sentence that that's within the newly added text that reads Act 250 mandates restoration of pits to control runoff and aesthetic impacts. I'm not sure why we are saying that here necessarily, and I guess if we want to include this kind of content, then we should clarify that would be the case when Act 250 jurisdiction applies to a particular earth extraction site. So
we could just take that sentence out. I was just trying to give a little bit more
depth to it.
background, and I was not being very
Yeah.
precise, so I have no problem just
Oh.
removing it if
Okay.
folks are okay with that.
Yeah, I just don't want to suggest that that would necessarily always be the case, this reliance on Act 250.
Everyone all right if I just remove that sentence? Okay,
I am.
Me too.
okay. Is that good? You're right with the remainder of it?
So my sense was, as you indicated, Brooke, that the plan itself adequately addressed this goal. So Janet, as Brooke indicated, you're not talking about plan revisions as much as you are the checklist that serves as the required report.
Yes, correct. And I also don't know that we need anything about natural resources in general under here, just for brevity. I would take out the previous paragraph. We cover that in another section.
Okay. Why don't we just remove the whole thing?
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting anyway. I don't know
Oh,
how
I'm
others
sorry.
feel.
I didn't realize I was just
Yeah.
adding to it, so, okay.
Yeah,
Everyone all right with deleting the form? It was just a summary that I'd created anyway, so, okay. All right, great. And let's move on to the PGA areas. So I'll spin down there. And all right, we have two of them. Alex, would you be able to bring up the map viewer if you think it's important to use to discuss your concerns about PGA areas? Or if
I'll
we
bring
can,
it up. I'll bring it up now.
all right, let me stop sharing that. I'll turn the mic over to you. Why don't you let us know your concerns as well as I think it was expressed in some of our partner comments as well.
Right. So we covered this a bit at the last meeting, so I apologize if this is repeating myself, but I'm going to zoom into Morrisville and talk about in the dark purple, the downtown center, and in the lighter purple pink is the planned growth area. And at the last meeting, I raised the issue that the planned growth area does seem to include areas that are within the flood hazard and river corridor hazard areas. And I'll put that overlay on so that you can see them. So the couple of areas that I highlighted at the last meeting were this area here. And if I turn the road layer on, we'll get some road names to hopefully help. So this is between the bypass portion of Route 100 and Feline Loop, where the river runs in this section of Morrisville. And it's mapped as part of the planned growth area. Lamoille's done a great job with their flood hazard overlay. So we know that even though it's in the planned growth area, there is a flood hazard overlay there. Another area I highlighted at the last meeting was to the north of the river in this location, south of Harold Street. And in both of these cases, I'm going to turn the flood hazard off so you can see a little better. In both of these cases, the planned growth area includes areas within the hazard zone that don't appear to me to be eligible for infill per the rule that we're supposed to be applying, because they're not surrounded by existing development, particularly this area along south of Harold Street along the river, as well as that other area that I'd previously shown. And so we had some conversation with the Regional Planning Commission at the last meeting about this, and I'm just in this, I think I'm just in this weird sort of conundrum, is that I think the statutory requirement for a planned growth area is that we would exclude areas that are not suitable for infill, that are not surrounded by existing development. And therefore some of these areas might want to be mapped as a different future land use area type. And the acknowledgement that some of these areas might be eligible for infill, and so it's a little, it can get a little granular. I have the same concern with the town of Stowe and portions of their planned growth area within mapped flood hazard areas, and so I'm just not quite sure how we think as a board the statute compels these hazard areas to be mapped as a different future land use type, or to what extent these overlays provide us the necessary sort of additional information to allow it to be mapped as a planned growth area, even potentially in contradiction with these infill rules. I'm curious what other board members think about these granular sorts of examples.
Hey, Alex,
Yes.
could you turn on the parcel lines for this?
Yes.
Because I think while you're doing that, what I'll say is, I think in my review of it, the parcels are larger. And so that there is the ability to still cluster on these parcels within areas of existing development. And I think that was why I sort of still saw this as infill. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 parcels in this area that are completely undeveloped, but they are surrounded by development. And I think the standard that we've used within reviewing other areas with regard to PGA is if you had 1 parcel in the midst of other developed parcels that was undeveloped, it would still be viewed as infill. So I did not necessarily have the same concern as you. Janet.
I kind of don't see it that way. Sarah, I think I agree with Alex that because of the wording in the statute for planned growth areas, it says the area excludes identified flood hazard and river corridor areas, except those areas containing pre-existing development in areas suitable for infill as defined, etc. And I think that we don't necessarily have to follow the parcel lines. You could follow the flood hazard line and except where there is development, sort of modify it there. I don't know. I was going to check the methodology to see what the VAPTA methodology says. Has anyone done that already on this note? No. But I tend to agree with Alex on this one for the planned growth areas. It's different for the village areas. The language is different. But for the planned growth areas, I think it's clear that they shouldn't be part of the mapped planned growth area.
I guess I'm confused because I thought the overlay meant that we were taking it out of the underlying, district, like it would be an overlay in zoning kind of notion. And so if that's the case, I think it is following the statute. And if it's an infill only thing, I don't see the need to necessarily figure that out all ahead of time now for every single parcel that exists. Oh, you have to draw your line over here. You can't use an overlay because this area doesn't seem to have any opportunities for infill. So am I misunderstanding how this is to be perceived? Because I thought that the overlay is the functional equivalent of drawing the lines in a different place. And the advantage of having an overlay is the flood hazard areas and river corridors sometimes change location. And so this was a way of not having to go back and redefine boundaries later if that occurs in the future. And it's like, so if what somebody wanted to do infill, they would file an application and, the municipality would figure out whether or not that works when they do or don't issue their zoning permit, right? Or am I totally not understanding? Kirsten?
So does somebody wish, I see Kirsten and Janet both have their hands raised, but Brooke has posed a question. Does somebody specifically want to answer that before we move on to the next person? Janet?
I think you're right to some degree, Brooke. I think we need to see that the plan has explicit policy that explains that. And as I said, the language is different for PGAs than it is for village areas. It does make it sound like you have to exclude them from the PGA in the statute. So unless the language of the plan is very clear that there that areas of flood hazard within the PGA are not eligible for the PGA status, basically. And I don't know that the plan is explicit in that respect.
Yeah, and Brooke, my perspective on your question is that the flood hazard areas are meant to be an overlay. They are meant to overlay on top of the underlying future land use area, and they help inform what we see with regard to those underlying future land use areas. But with planned growth areas, there's a specific prohibition from those future land use areas, including these flood hazard zones, unless they are in areas suitable for infill. So I don't think the overlay nullifies the statutory exclusion that is described in the description of the planned growth area type. So so what I don't want to nitpick too much. So this is why I don't want to, take this too granularly. But when I see very large swaths of flood hazard area that hang together as a pretty large parcel or large portion of a parcel, that are not surrounded by existing development and therefore likely not suitable for infill, I think maybe that should be a different future land use area type. When, like Sarah said, when there's a portion of a parcel, let me share my screen again and show you the an example perhaps. So again, in Morrisville, and south of Harrell Street, between the river and Harrell Street, when I put the flood hazard area overlay on, you can see that it subsumes this entire parcel here, which is largely an open field right here. And so I look at that and I say, that's never going to see infill from the standpoint of the types of planned growth area development that we typically think of. It might see, and I think the regional planning commission staff said it might see green space use, and so one could argue that perhaps that's relevant. But the parcel along Harrell Street, this parcel here, that parcel is partially in the flood hazard area and could see infill, in portions that overlap with that zone. But these larger areas right along the river, I kind of see them as not meeting the statutory intent for a planned growth area and thinking perhaps these should be something else. But that's why I wanted to raise the discussion, because I'm not sure I'm not sure how consistent we've been with that with our other regional plans. And I just happen to notice it here with fairly large parcels in Morrisville and also to some degree in Stowe.
All right.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Alex.
And I think there's a question about the BAFTA methodology. I think I have it up, and I'd just like to quickly read it before we move on to Kirsten, which is floodplains and river corridors. Floodplains and river corridors will be included in the underlying future land use area that the RPC deems most appropriate for the location using the FLU guidance. Floodplains and river corridors will be shown on the maps with a patch pattern. The river corridor layer is maintained by DEC. Flood hazard areas as available include, and that lists all the different zones, including the special flood hazard areas shown the extent of 1% annual 100-year flood as mapped by FEMA. So there's a question raised on that. Kirsten.
So I understood that the use of the overlay would work in the way that Brooke and I think Janet have described in general, in terms of a general statement that the underlying PGA area would exclude, in terms of implementation, would exclude flood hazard river corridor. But I don't think we've settled on any aspect of that, you know, if these features move in the future, that's like part of a purpose of that. I think it's just the mapping methodology. And I want to point out, and I had mentioned this at our last meeting, that and maybe Alex would like to show us, I think some of this area, if not both locations, they're asking for tier 1B status. And a tier 1B status area allows that a tier 1B can include flood hazard and river corridor areas when the municipality has adopted bylaws that are consistent with the standards under the statute. And my understanding of what the board has done with the other plan reviews to date, and I think if we look at the wording of our pre-application response letters, we have basically lumped all the categories together. Like we've taken the sum total of here's all this tier 1B area, and we've looked at that standard. And I think we have in some cases examined flood hazard areas in a PGA where located outside of a tier 1B. So I think this is an important standard that the board needs to reconcile as a whole. And like setting aside this particular plan review, if a PGA area is part of a tier 1B and the municipality has those bylaws to that standard, in that instance, do we allow the PGA area to include flood hazard river corridor? Because, you know, we do have these two elements of the statute. So, and I don't know that we're going to resolve this today. And Janet, I think you weren't at the last meeting, but I was saying you might want to have a chat with our attorneys about this. So I think, and I myself, in terms of the areas that Alex is focusing us in on, I don't myself generally see those as sort of infill areas. But I can recognize there might have some functional use, right, in the way that the RPC has described. So, you know, for recreational, et cetera. So where that puts us as far as what we want to say in the reply, I'm not sure, but those are my thoughts.
Anna.
So I'm reviewing the methodology, the VAPTA methodology for PGAs. Excuse me a minute. And under mapping process on page 9, item E says exclude flood hazard and river corridor areas except pre-existing development suitable for infill or redevelopment, by generally excluding flood hazard and river corridors outside of the highest density areas adjacent to the center. So I think for PGA, I think we don't, this isn't about tier 1B right now. This is about mapping the FLU category PGA. And I think the methodology and the statute suggest that these areas that Alex is describing should not be mapped in these two particular PGAs.
So I think what I'd like to
So-
do is summarize what I've heard for the sake of time, and then the board can say if we're in agreement on this, is to recommend that Brooke have advisory language in the pre-application response, identifying these areas as not eligible for PGA, and that they should be considered for mapping in another future land use area. Does that sound? I'm seeing amenable to different board. I'm seeing one head nod. I'm seeing a thumbs up. Kirsten? How are
Yeah,
you
and I'm
on this?
okay with what Janet has described,
Okay,
like that, with moving forward with that.
Brooke, do you feel like that
Interpretation.
gives you what you need to? Okay, head nod there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will, I will point out, if we're gonna go on and talk about the Stowe PGA, I think Alex might want to. There is a difference in the materials that were submitted. Stowe's, Tier 1B information talks about, that they do confirm the river corridor as well as the flood hazard bylaws. In Morristown, we've only got, I'm sorry, no, that they're removing it, that the flood hazard is removed. And so in Morristown, the issue that we have is we only have confirmation of the flood hazard regs, not the river corridor. And I looked and I don't think they have river corridor. So if we were to have them instead verify, like for Stowe, that the overlay was removing it, I think that that's probably the information that we needed, notwithstanding the alteration to the underlying PGA. If you follow what I'm saying, Janet, does that sound like what we need? Okay, cool. Thank you. So I'm good to continue. We want to throw it back to
and-
Alex.
And Brooke, in my email to you back in February, I provided some specific examples of where I thought there was substantial divergence from the methodology with regard to the planned growth area and the flood hazard area. So feel free to, grab those for the next draft if you want to, some specific examples. I will say that the Stowe examples are not as inclusive of entire parcels. They tend to be portions of parcels, to Sarah's point earlier. But I can show you a couple of quick examples and then we can move on from this. So hold on. So here's Stowe. And the dark purple is the downtown center. The surrounding pink or lighter purple is the planned growth area, and the flood hazard areas are in cross-hatching. So, for example, on the north side of the downtown area here, there's a parcel that's partially developed and is entirely included in the planned growth area, but fully half of it is in the flood hazard zone related to this waterway. And in my mind, it seems large enough that it might make sense to break the parcel line and map the portion that's in flood hazard as something other than planned growth area. That's one example in Stowe. Other examples are further up the mountain road. And because the flood hazard area moves along the river and the river crosses the road, it varies. But here's another example near Loose Hill Road. And you can see here the planned growth area. I'll turn the flood hazard off. Is on the south side of the river. And there is some existing development already there. But when you turn the flood hazard area on, again, you see a portion of that as likely being an area that's in my mind, like Kirsten was saying, not suitable for infill, even though there's existing development adjacent to it, but not sort of all around it, particularly because there's a river on one side. So this is a much smaller example, but a similar one to potentially a place where a parcel line could be broken in order to have the PGA be more in conformance with the statutory intent of excluding these hazard areas.
I did transfer, you had a number of, it sounds like with those similar areas, it is embedded in our letter down in the rural section, where you had some suggestions about reorganizing those flu areas. So I think that they sort of dovetail with what you're talking about. So maybe you can
Totally,
help me
Brooke, that's
offline to make sure I
yeah.
get the right language for the next one.
I can help you offline. That language you incorporated later in the memo is not related to what I just spoke of. It's related to some general concerns about the rural general category, not the planned growth area category. So I gave you two different location specific comments.
Okay. And I put all the pieces of the puzzle together. I'm like, you didn't talk about the PGA in there.
The only other thing that I wanted to bring up specific to the response letter had to do with Stowe's downtown center mapping. And I'm gonna put my cards on the table. I was reviewing comments from our partners this morning because I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed anything. And it was some of their comments that made me remember, oh yeah, I had indicated to Brooke I had some concern about these couple other items too, and they didn't seem to land in the memo or the response letter. Anyway, the Stowe Downtown Center seems very large to me. I can share my screen again if that's helpful for folks to see it. Let me do that. So once again, we're back in Stowe. The downtown center is in dark purple in the center. I'm going to turn on the legacy designation areas so you can get a sense of where, well, if you can see that, the red cross-hatching is not super visible. But in red cross-hatching, we have the legacy downtown designation. And as you can see, the purple area is much larger than that. And that's fine. I'm perfectly happy with larger downtown centers as a part of this effort. But I do wonder about, for example, this portion of the downtown center, this large forested area here, and whether that in fact is part of the community's plan for the kind of development that downtown centers embody. Similarly, there are some other very large undeveloped areas that are wooded, like this entire area here, these three large parcels here. And I didn't have time to raise this at our last meeting. I wish I had, because Sarah McShane, the Stowe Town planner, was with us at that time. So I just wondered if we might want to call those out as areas to ask for additional information to substantiate the very large increase of the downtown center future land use type in those spots with the final application.
Apologize. I don't know where we lost that part of your email, Alex. I think it must have gotten cut and then not pasted. So I apologize.
9 endangerment finding.
That's okay, Brooke. You were juggling a lot, and that's the point of these meetings, is for us to double check and bring up additional items. So yeah, it's in that email from February 12th, but perhaps if others are so inclined, we could add it.
You want me to bring up, I have your written comments in there. Would that be useful, or you feel like you've conveyed it adequately?
I think I conveyed it and showed it.
All right, we've got Alex, I think, resolve. Kirsten.
Well, yeah, just to respond to Alex, I'm comfortable advising that Stowe could supply additional information in terms of, how the municipal plan aligns with this draft regional plan. I think that's fine. I have whenever Alex is done, I have a different question.
I am done.
Okay. Kirsten?
So my question is about the Johnson Village Center. The advisory recommendation identifies that it may be worthwhile to consider expanding the village center area to include all or a portion of the Vermont State University campus and remaining parcels along School Street. And you may recall this was discussed at the meeting, and the RPC had indicated that I'm just paraphrasing and going from memory, but they had in part omitted that as part of the Johnson Village Center because of the large size of the parcel. And we had discussed the possibility of including a portion of it focused around the area that already has some infrastructure and development, and perhaps in closer proximity to the existing Johnson Village Center area. And I think because of the size of that parcel, I don't know that it would all qualify to become part of the Johnson Village Center. As one board member, I would support, that a portion of it. It's fairly large. So I don't know, Alex, do you want to pull that up, or what do others think?
So, Brooke, do you feel like you can perhaps parse the words in the response to capture that?
Yeah, I think that Alex's notations were similar to Kirsten, suggesting a portion of Vermont State University campus, so we can make that adjustment, sure.
All right, I'm just
If the
going
board,
to
yeah,
say that we're going over time, and I can see our folks from Addison County are sort of pacing in the background. So I'd like to try and keep us on task if we can. Janet, you have your hand patiently raised.
Just to point out that you could look at the Johnson Village municipal line as for some guidance there. That's all.
All right, fantastic. What other areas do we need to get to, Brooke?
Oh, I would like a little bit, going back to Alex's, the downtown area in Stowe. I wasn't clear on, are these advisory suggestions or required revisions in terms of altering the boundaries?
My suggestion would be to indicate that it's our lack of clarity as to why those large forested parcels were included, and have advisory recommendations to request additional information to substantiate them.
Okay, great. I will do that. So Janet has her hand up.
No, she just hasn't taken it down yet.
Okay.
Anybody else? Brooke, what else do we need to cover on Memorial?
The only thing I wanted to point out, but I think everyone has probably seen it, is just in terms of the Stowe Mountain Road Crossroads Village Center. We did decide last meeting, and I changed it in the document, to require additional information to substantiate the suitability of the proposed village center. That's the one that we had altered and asked for more information so that we can make a better determination. And I think if everyone else has reviewed the remainder, I will make these changes and we can bring it back hopefully next Monday, because we need to get it out and make a vote on that day. So I think I have all of the changes, and I will make those, get it posted so that we can look at it and hopefully get it finalized on a week from now.
All right, so Janet has had her hand patiently raised, however,
No.
just to,
So can you hear me?
yes.
Oh, so I am losing control of my computer. The state of Vermont is restarting my device momentarily, so it won't let me put my hand down. And you'll probably lose me at 1:58. I don't know why it's doing this now, but it's going to. So my hand is up, but I don't mean it to be still up, and I can't put it down.
All right, understood, and we'll hopefully see you back shortly. But so Brooke, that I think answered my question is you do not need action today. We can postpone until next Monday. All right, fantastic. So if nothing else, we'll move on to the Addison County Regional Planning Commission pre-application response letter. And Kirsten, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I think we have some guests from Addison here as well. I just want to acknowledge Adam and Katie and but yeah, what's the board's pleasure? I sent around a draft of what I'm calling, part one, going through the goals and elements. And it's lengthy. We can go through the whole thing. We can just jump to board comments and questions. Like, how would you like to do it? Did you get a chance to read it?
Yes, and thank you. And thank you. I just want to recognize Kirsten. Thank you for taking this on. You were not originally assigned to this and you jumped in to cover it. So job well done. A very thorough response. I had a chance to review over the weekend. Do board members care how we go through? Should we have Kirsten just go through, maybe highlight the areas that we are asking for changes or modifications on? Or is there, I'm seeing a head nod from Brooke.
That would be my
Alex?
preference, rather than going through every line, but rather just jumping to the ones that Kirsten noted something that we ought to discuss.
All right, Kirsten, is that something you?
Sure. And now I'm just myself going through it and looking for the things that are basically more than advisory. There's quite a bit of advisory content here. So is that what?
Talk about advisory recommendations, Kirsten, that's fine. You have some where there's no advisory anything, and I just don't think we need to talk about those. But where there are substantial advisory recommendations, I'm happy to start
Okay.
there.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this has to do with, sorry for all the scrolling back and forth, but it's goal 1. And there's some detailed advisory recommendations that you can see as they pertain to goal 1. Is this anything the board would like to pause on and discuss?
I think that the third bullet is something that I also captured when I was reviewing it, and I assume it's just a typo. But I was also in the same boat because during the presentation, the regional planning staff made it clear that the goal was 60% of the targeted housing development in these centers and neighborhoods. But the memo talked about 80%. So I just assumed that the memo was wrong.
Adam's nodding. I had also flagged this, Alex. So if we're okay with continuing to highlight this detail, I'll move to the next advisory recommendation item. Are we ready to move on, or does anyone? Okay. This is as it pertains to goal 2, which is about providing a strong economy. And there's a number of advisory recommendations. Again, fairly specific, detailed, all advisory. Anything that we want to, and we've lost Janet. Maybe she'll call in.
I think hopefully after her computer restarts and no one else is getting that error message, are they yet?
No,
I got it this morning and it was a very
yeah, I got
strange
it.
message that said that we're gonna do this to you at 1:30 something or else. And so Janet just didn't do it yet. She'll be back in 5 minutes.
All right, fantastic.
Yeah, my computer did an update this morning and it only took a short while.
Does anybody have anything that they'd like to discuss under economy?
Okay, I'm gonna,
In general, I thought that these were decent advisory recommendations. I thought some of them might have been a little nitpicking, but I think that they were. I'm happy someone made them. It wasn't me, so thank you for whoever did the detailed work to identify these items. I just don't want to make the Regional Planning Commission feel like they have to rewrite large portions, particularly when it comes to the first bullet, which talks about better threading the chapter with the appendix. I think that may
Yeah,
be more
I know, and-
stylistic than substantive. But
well,
I'm
and it's
happy.
also,
It's fine to leave it in there.
well, let me ask you this kind of general question too, Alex, along those lines, like the way this is worded, and this came from a different board member, but the way it's phrased, work is needed to do this, but it's all advisory. Would you tend to soften that language to make it more advisory and suggestive than to say that it's something that's needed?
Yes, I guess that
Okay.
would be one way to address my concern is to leave them
Okay.
all in, but
Yeah,
just
it's
soften
all
the
advice.
wording.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. Are we ready to move on or?
I think so.
I
I'm
am.
seeing a few head nods.
Okay. Goal 3, access to education and vocational training. Those are the advisory recommendations. Any questions or discussion? And great, Janet is back. Janet, do you want us to reverse and go back to sections around goals 1, 2, and 1 and 2? Like, let us know if you want us to backtrack a little bit. I'm not hearing that she wants that to occur. So yeah, any discussion of these advisory recommendations?
Only again, I feel like the second bullet about the increase in students at Mount Abe is maybe interesting from a data standpoint, but I'm not sure that that's
Yeah.
super significant in terms of our review of the conformance of the plan. So I might soften or potentially even omit that one, as curious as I am for the explanation.
Would you tend to just delete that?
I guess I would, but I don't want to disrespect the board member who raised the issue and caught the what is an interesting sort of outlier.
Yeah.
So
Are we,
it was me. I'll state that, and I think you're fine softening it, but in a state where we have declining enrollments, and there was a surge, it might be interesting to expand upon it. It's just was a bright spot that I saw that was interesting, and it might just be helpful to know more about, but again,
Okay.
softening it, deleting it, what have you, but I tend to like to try and emphasize some of the positives when we see them.
Happy to let Kirsten figure that one out.
okay. I'm going to move on if that's okay.
Sure.
So this has to do with transportation, and there were a couple advisory recommendations. Any questions? Looks like we have a question from the RPC. I don't know if that's Adam or Katie or someone else.
It's me. It's Adam. Thank you. And
Yeah.
you know, as you're going through this, I want to be respectful of your process. I know this is your deliberation. And I'm just curious, you know, like the question about, Mount Abe. I'm sitting here thinking, oh, I know the answer, but if you don't want us to jump in, or if you want to speak when we're spoken to, I guess I'm looking for a little, guidance as to how involved or not you want us to be.
Sarah, would you like to address that?
Sure. So, absolutely, thank you for, attending and, wonderful resource to know the answers. I think what the board, is not necessarily looking for the answers so much as what we'd like you to address with the next draft. So I think that's where the board deliberations need to sort of stay focused in terms of, how do we prescribe or not prescribe? If there's something simple and easy to take on, absolutely. But I think what you're perhaps witnessing us doing is, where we have typos and things like that, we might delete them in this process, and it might just be helpful to you to have at some point. So, if you really would like to participate, there's something that you'd really like to speak to, by all means, feel free to raise your hand. But I think in terms of what we're endeavoring to do today is not necessarily to get answers to the question so much as, limit, the comments coming back to you. Is that a fair description, board members?
I think it is. However, Adam, I would tell you that in past sessions with other RPCs, if you see a potential advisory recommendation or otherwise that you feel is problematic, it's helpful for you to flag it now so we can have a little discussion about that, and that we don't end up giving you a response letter that includes something that you can't do or that you really don't understand.
Brooke?
I think it's really important that the board is giving a consistent message to each of our RPCs, because I know these would be great if they could be addressed in the next draft of the plan, but that's not where everybody is at. And in terms of Lamoille, for example, I have been very clear that advisory recommendations are just that, and they are not definitive of whether you pass or fail necessarily. You know, it's like, this could make it better. And I just want to be sure that we're giving that same expectation. And that's why I've been trying to make sure that if we're saying advisory recommendation versus required revision, that a required revision or give us more information because we can't figure it out, that's when the RPC needs to really do something, versus making it better is not mandatory.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brooke. Adam,
Okay.
is that
Noting that
Okay.
we've lost Janet again.
okay?
Yes, thank you very much.
Kirsten, would
I
you
will-
like to continue proceeding?
Yeah, anyone want to remain on goal 4 any longer? And Janet's back.
I think you're
Okay, I'm
fine
gonna
to
move
proceed.
on. Okay. Goal 5, natural and historic features. So you can see the advisory recommendation here. Any discussion, comment?
Want to keep going?
Okay. Goal 6. No advisory recommendations on goal 6. Goal 7, energy, renewables. Same thing, no advisory recommendations. Goal 8, recreation. Or, you know, please, if there's any other content in this draft, of course, you know, like if you want something condensed or reworded, you know, just tell me to pause, and I'm happy to obviously discuss any of it.
I think the next area that you have is goal 11. Kirsten, if you want to jump down to that on page
okay.
16, where
Thanks,
you have
Sarah.
advisory recommendations.
Oh, actually, I'm seeing one under 9. So this was
Oh, you're right.
agriculture and forestry industries. And there was an advisory recommendation to consider referencing the ANR AMPs for water quality on logging jobs. It aligns with advisory recommendations that we have made for some other RPCs. Any question or discussion? Okay. And then you were saying, Sarah, we're down at goal 11, which is the
Yeah,
housing.
sorry, I missed that one.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay, so here are the goal 11 advisory recommendations. When you finished reading it, and if anyone, anything we want to discuss? Brooke's shaking her head. Janet, I'm remembering you had a question, but I think I captured it. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, couldn't find my cursor. My recommendation was that the housing chapter should include the box from chapter 8 that explains the municipalization of the housing targets. And
Do
I
you want
think
that?
I said that while we were in Middlebury. So I think the RPC was receptive to that idea, but I think Alex also felt like it was missing from that earlier chapter, and then suddenly there it was, many pages later.
Could agree. It's not that the information wasn't there, it's just where it was
Right.
located. So either
Yeah.
a reference back forward or backwards, or just relocating it might be helpful for people to understand that. The
I
other
feel
item
like
that
I feel like I've got that also within the elements. I think there's a reference,
Oh,
like
okay.
the elements and the goals, there's this funny overlap. So
Yeah.
anyway, but I'll add that here as well. Is there anything else?
Yeah, the only other item that I think came up during our meeting with the RPC in Middlebury with regard to the housing targets was the level of affordability for that for the targets, like what percentages of the new housing, what are the goals for affordability within those targets? So I don't know if that is captured in a different section of the response letter, Kirsten, but I remember
think
chatting about that.
I think we have it in the elements.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it's in the like, do you want it in both? I guess if it's in the elements, do you want it here as well?
I don't need,
Maybe just what we did in previous responses was just indicate that there was more information
Yeah,
in the element section
cross
on housing.
reference and vice versa.
Yeah.
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 All right,
that'd
are
be
we
great.
ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay. Goal 12. Number of advisory recommendations.
Any comments from board members? All right, do you want to keep going, Kirsten? Do you have anything,
Yeah.
questions back for us?
I don't have any questions myself, but if we're ready to move on. Goal 13. Childcare, one advisory recommendation. Any question or discussion? Just let me know if you want me to stop. Flood resiliency goal 14, so 1 advisory recommendation. Good, keep going. Goal 15, all set. And now we're down to getting into the elements. And okay, under element 2, which is, sorry, I'm going to go back up to natural resources and working lands. We've got this recommendation to provide percent forestry and agricultural lands conserved by region. Any question about that? Again, it's advisory.
Which, this is element 2?
Correct. And
Yeah,
I'm remembering, that we, I think, have made a recommendation for this in a different regional plan. And yeah, go ahead.
I think the board response for this section, I think it's better placed in the future land use section under, I don't know if it's the rural areas is where there's reference to conservation, the Vermont conservation design in the statute, and that this section should be more about the items A through E that are called out in statute, rather than the future land use map and the Vermont conservation design. So I don't think this is bad content. I think it's just in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And that the more general natural resource content should be here.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Sorry.
I'll let you put a note in and you can move on when ready.
Yep. Okay, are we ready to keep going? Transportation, there was the same advisory recommendation that I think we've retained in Lamoille since this study was finalized. We've retained as advisory. And then this other second bullet, which was a board member comment, but I don't, any discussion.
Did we retain that I was trying to remember this over the weekend, and maybe Brooke can help us on that. Did we retain that, or did we recognize that because the Act 1A1 study of 140 or 45 has completed, that this might not be relevant? Or how do we leave this with Lamoille?
Thought we were leaving it in, but they have verified with they've sent documentation, but in terms of, we're still putting it in as an advisory recommendation to include it in the plan.
Okay.
So
So it's in ours, but it's advisory.
it's still a draft on Lamoille.
Mhm.
And obviously this is still a draft. I mean, move on.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, 5 utility and facility. 1 advisory recommendation. I'm gonna keep going. Yeah, so this is just the implementation element, and this, again, 1 advisory recommendation.
Are you aware on page 33, you still have that highlighted XX?
No, but I'll find it. Yeah, I think that's one of those cross-referencing things. I think when the sort of like the final copy is proofread, that would be a place where a page number would be inserted.
Did the board member who provided this recommendation, I don't know if it was you, Kirsten, or another one of us, just speak to it a little bit? Because it does, ask for a matrix, an implementation matrix, which we've
Yeah.
seen in various plans, but I'm not sure. I just would like to hear, the thoughts on why that was recommended versus what they have in the plan already.
Yeah, this wasn't my recommendation. Janet.
It could have been me. A lot's happened between when I may have made that comment and now, and if you will forgive me, I'll just let it speak for itself.
That's fine.
All right, I'm gonna move on. The compatibility with other plans, I'll just comment like, well done, whole chapter on this and very detailed, and it was great. Housing. We have a number of advisory recommendations. Here, I'll try to get them all on one. You can see them all at once. Is that too small? Does anyone want time to read it or pause here to discuss? Just give me a thumbs up when you want me to move on.
Yeah, if you could just pause for a moment. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with the comments. Highly specific as some of them are, but helpful nonetheless. Yeah, my only continued comment was what came up at our meeting with the RPC in Middlebury, when I think it was me that, suggested it might be helpful to have additional information about affordability goals in order to know 10 years down the line whether the housing that actually gets built is in fact meeting not just the housing targets, but any affordability targets that the region may have.
I think a lot of these were mine, and I was going to say that, some of these are very specific. And, I don't know that they need to be in the board response. But are you all fine with them?
I'm fine with them,
Okay.
big advisory.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yep. Yes.
we ready to move on? Okay, got a thumbs up from Sarah. 10 advisory recommendations. So let me know if you want to discuss anything or are ready to move on.
Happy to proceed.
Okay. I will do so. Flood resilience. So this was more than advisory. So this is like a sort of make some revisions, to meet the requirement. So this is more substantive. So this kind of aligns with some of our prior discussion about having policies to mitigate risk. And part of the statutory obligation pertains to, I'll just go back to it. It says, flood resilience element, must include flood resilience element A that 2 recommends policies and strategies to protect the areas identified, designated, and to mitigate risk to public safety, critical infrastructure, historic structures, and public investments. And the plan is thorough, but didn't explicitly state anything about policies and strategies with respect to risks to historic structures. And maybe that's inherent in the overall like flood resiliency components of the plan. So that first bullet, that one was mine. So I'll own it, but I'm not wed to it, if we think it's unnecessary. I don't know that we've gotten into the weeds this, far with other plans, or if it's necessarily required or would be advisory. But I just wanted to put it out there for discussion. And then the second one is confirm that the map, and that the second one is me too, confirming that the mapping is based on, and this again kind of goes back to the statutory language. And maybe this is sort of duplicative with respect to the mapping methodology, but what are some thoughts?
So I'll speak first and just say I am worried about the language that we're proposing here as being imprecise. So I think down below where we say about the 100-year, acknowledge that the 100-year flood is what defines the SHFA. These are the special flood hazard areas defined by FEMA. It's not defined by the river corridor maps. And it's an area that will be inundated by a flood event having a 1% chance of being equal or exceeded in a given year, sometimes referred to or also known as the 100-year flood. So it's sort of taking the converse of that. And so, I'm not quite sure what problem we're trying to solve, but the language is problematic to me.
So it's not, in my mind, a problem that we're trying to solve. It's just recognizing that this is the statutory requirement. There has to be an element that identifies flood hazard and fluvial erosion hazard areas based on corridor maps provided by ANR. And did they do that? Are they confirming that that's what the mapping reflects? Brooke and Janet, do you want to jump in?
I was just gonna say, if this is a revision, I don't like the language. It appears to meet it if you do the following. It needs to be, no, you don't meet it, here's a required revision, or you meet it and here's an advisory recommendation. I don't like, this is language we have not used before that I think is unclear as to, or maybe it's too clear.
Well, maybe we
you
can
know.
first decide or determine if this belongs at all, if it's advisory, if it's, Janet.
I don't think it belongs. I think it's clear that ANR provides these maps and everybody uses them.
Okay.
And
So you
that's where the
I
information
think it's
comes
just so
from.
self-evident.
Yeah, Yeah, and the
Okay, so-
methodology references it as well.
And is that, and it sounds like, Sarah, would you agree with that? Like, or is that what we would like to do as a board? Just at least delete this? Any objection? Okay,
No objection. I would delete it. I'm looking at a page in the plan where they talk about the river corridors being developed by the Vermont Rivers Program. So it seems like it's
Okay.
clear to me in the plan where they're
okay,
coming
so
from.
what about this historic structures? Is that sort of like inherently woven into other general flood resiliency elements, so we don't need to call that out?
I think so, but honestly, only because I don't think we've gone to that level of detail in prior plans.
We haven't.
So I don't really want to do it now halfway through our review
Okay.
of pre-applications.
I'm fine with omitting these. I just wanted to kind of, there were things I'd noted and happy to have the discussion. Okay, so with that, we don't need to worry about this wording either, right?
Well, you want the draft plan appears to meet. Just
Oh,
the
yeah,
phrase,
you're
the end
right.
phrase you don't want. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. Okay.
I think that first bullet on advisory needs to be clarified. I'm not sure what is being talked about there. Or I guess it's just, what's the recommendation there?
I think this was one of yours, Sarah. Do you want to explain it and maybe help finesse the wording?
I don't believe that is mine. I'm trying to pull mine up right
Apology
now.
then,
but-
it would have been Janet's, and
Is
sorry
it
if,
mine?
yeah,
and,
sorry. Oh, it's
you
one
know,
of the two of
and-
you, so,
And if it was mine, it's, I didn't intend my list to be folded into the response.
okay.
They were my notes as I was reading through, and so I'll look
Well,
at
yeah,
that
and-
again and see what I
Just-
was talking about, because I don't know.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and just, yeah, I know.
I'll
I
go
know,
back to
Janet.
it.
I know because I'm looking at the page and the map that you
Oh, okay.
reference, which, like, if you want me to share my screen, Kirsten, I can do that. But the specific
Okay.
map that's referenced is very hard to see the difference between the various defined floodplains because
Yeah,
just because of the scale of the map. So,
I'm remembering now. Yeah. So I think the recommendation is to say that map 2 on page 10 is difficult
interpret.
to interpret and needs revision or something like that, or could use revision. And I don't know that the rest of it needs to be there.
well, I think it does. I'm just backing you up from your prior notes there, Janet. The map, the
Okay.
page and the map doesn't have any explanatory text. It just has a legend. And again, it's hard to see the different delineations because of the scale of the map, but some sort of note that explains what these floodplains represent
Okay,
with
yeah.
regard to the
Yeah.
second sentence you had in your, I think that's a good comment. It's a
Yeah.
nice looking map. It just needs a little bit more
Yeah.
explanation.
Yeah, and I think the notes that I made were not formulated as recommendations. They were just notes to myself. And
Yeah,
so
and
where this happens, maybe I can go back and reformulate it so that it's a recommendation.
yeah, and yeah, Janet, as you know, I sort of pirated this from your notes
Yeah.
while we were sort of passing the ball back and forth here, so
Yeah. I appreciate
Okay.
that now. Yeah.
Are the other bulleted items still, like, Janet, do you want to work with me on refining this? Like, or do you feel you
What,
have?
yeah, when is this due?
It's due at the end of the month. So we will be discussing it again next Monday. And then
Yeah.
the following Monday would be the date when we would be approving content. So we have a
I
little
think-
time.
Yeah, as I said, I'm not 100% but I think
Yeah.
next week I can work with you on this.
Okay, that would be great. Okay, so we'll move on. The future land use, a number of advisory recommendations. Any discussion on this?
Are these mine too?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to like, not,
That's okay.
Yeah.
I can
so,
work with you on these next week as well.
okay, great.
Unless you feel like working on them beforehand on your own.
I mean,
I think you have
tweaked-
the strategy that we're reviewing the first part today, and next Monday we're going to review the second part dealing primarily with the future land use area mapping, right?
Right, and the tier 1Bs, yep.
Yeah. So this
Oh,
this
okay.
section seems to go with that second, the next piece that we'll review next week. So maybe we don't need to delve into these bullet items today, and we can take them up at the top next Monday with the
Yeah,
rest
we
of
can-
the future land
we
use
can-
area.
We can start here next week.
Yeah,
And
that's what I would recommend.
Okay, yeah, so we're as far as what I had provided for discussion. And unless there's something else that the board would like to discuss about this draft or reply or anything maybe from the RPC, is there anything that they would like to offer, or if we have time, how are we doing on
Do you want to
schedule?
stop sharing
Like-
so we can see
Yeah.
people in case people want
Yes.
to raise hands? Thanks.
So I will, since you invited us, or I'm gonna let Hannah talk, actually. I see her hands raised. Hannah Andrews, our GIS, manager.
Hi, y'all. Thank you for all of this feedback. It's very helpful. Just the final note on the letter. It says the GIS data for the infrastructure in the map viewer needs to be updated. And I was wondering if that is still applicable. I sent along our best available water and sewer data. And I'm not sure if it made it to the right person. I'm happy to send it again.
I didn't,
Did
I
you
wasn't
send it
aware
to-
that,
Hannah, did you send it to Josh Plaxa?
Yes, I believe I sent it to you and to you, Janet, and to Josh. But I never got a
I may have
response
been
from
away.
Josh. So yeah.
Oh,
Okay, I'll
so
reach out
it
to
might have
Josh
been a
again to
black
make
hole.
sure. No worries.
yeah, I wasn't aware of that, Handa, so thank you for doing that, and thank you for letting us know.
Yeah, of course.
And perhaps that will become moot.
Okay,
If, we'll take a look at it.
great. Will do.
So I think that's something that I flagged, Kirsten, that I'm trying to investigate because the data was actually a data set from DEC. And so I'm not sure if we're going to have to develop a separate data set in order for us to update it. I think Chittenden County ran into the same problem, or if we can update DEC's data set. So that's just something we'll have to have a discussion with their GIS mappers about.
Yeah, Sarah, can you and I connect about that as well? Sort of.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
great.
That's right.
Is there anything else anyone would like to make known about the Addison draft? Or the draft reply, like before we conclude discussing it today?
I would just like to say thank you for your comments, and we appreciate constructive criticism to make the plan better. So we're happy to see advisory comments, because our goal is to get it as best as we can. I will tell you, we don't have we have paper floodplain maps still from 1986. So, and we can't use the new FEMA ones that are coming out in 2 years or so because they're not official. So we've tried to, what you're seeing is our attempt to digitize some maps and make some placeholders while that they get those new maps out. So we recognize we need to explain that a little better.
Great. Well, that's fantastic that you did that digitization.
Just credit where credit's due. It comes from the UVM Spatial Analysis Lab. They're topographically defined floodplains. So they're the ones who did all the really incredible work. And just to note, I will update the map, but our plan is to have high resolution imagery available when you access the plan online. So then that map would be a lot more accessible to zoom in and out. But absolutely hear your feedback that it's hard to read when it's 8.5 by 11.
Anything
Great.
else from our Addison participants? Any other public comments? All right, well, Kirsten, you did an excellent job keeping us on time too. We're back on time to 2:30. So we'll move on unless anybody else wants to say anything, but thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Addison. We'll continue next week. All right.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks to everyone from Addison. Thanks, Hannah, and Katie, and Adam.
Thanks, y'all.
All right, we will move back to discussion of road construction jurisdiction guidance. My apologies with the retreat. There were a couple of last minute drafts flying around. And there was one that came out this weekend that was inclusive of proposal from legal to include specifically utility corridor. Who, I'm seeing a head nod from Janet. Has anybody else had a chance to read the one that came out yesterday?
Yes, it's short, so I've looked at it.
All right, so perhaps we can share that. I'm going to rely upon Brooke, my partner in crime, to share the screen with that latest draft. It's.
Can you tell me which one that is? Is that the 315?
Yes.
Okay. And you
It's
want
the
me to
Ides
use,
of March Deluxe Edition.
shall I use the Word or the PDF version?
Why don't you do Word so we can maybe mark it up as we go? But Janet, you have a question first?
Nope, not first.
Okay,
As soon as it comes up.
okay.
I mean, I guess I could start as Brooks finding it, but I noticed that the utility paragraph uses the word should. And I think it probably needs to be more explicit as to, these corridors are exempt from this.
Right.
And I kind of think that the language in the section on farm and forestry roads similarly it's not explicit that we're saying they don't apply, or that the jurisdiction doesn't apply to those
All
unless
right.
they're converted.
Well, let's take this from the top. If we can scroll back up to the top, I got also via email, and this is just a little bit of where this is at right now, is legal has begun reviewing it. The draft language on utilities that Janet stated actually came from legal, but legal is continuing to review it. So I imagine that we'll have some more wordsmithing by next week. One of the things that was just proposed in this whole draft I want to go over is we're using 4.0 for a guidance. So it's going to be guidance doc number 4. That's already taken. So we're moving everything to 3. When you strike out 4, it does not look like it's struck, but it is. And so we are using 3.0 as opposed to 34. So just to walk you quickly through some of these changes. And then also there's proposed under the purpose that we don't need to say that this is for coordinators and the public, because if we just delete that, it sort of means that it's for everyone, which is what it is. Janet, do you have anything in the general provision section?
Just a note that there is an internal reference to a section 4.0 something toward the end that needs to be corrected to 3.
Okay. We'll fast forward into legal standards. I don't think anything has changed there. And then I think we get
That's
into,
just a statute for
I
people's
hope it hasn't
reference.
changed because it's just a statute. Yeah.
definitions. I think we're sticking with the definitions from last time for road and driveway. But we did make a change to routine maintenance and elaborated more on that to put it into line with what we already have. So, and I think that last ad was from legal, if I do recall, Brooke, is that accurate?
Excuse me?
Yes, it is. And I will note with regard to the routine maintenance and minor repairs, I have had conversations with 2 coordinators who have some really important input into this section. So I will just put that as a pin because I have not had an opportunity to have to integrate any of that information or even discuss it yet with Sarah, and because we're going to need to make sure that this is going to be workable.
All right. So I think what we're endeavoring to do, though, there's board conversation from the last meeting about trying to make this routine maintenance, make it match what's in statute. And so that's what we're endeavoring to do with this. I think just walking through the rest of the changes since last time, and then we can go and pop back up into different areas. I'd like to continue on with methodology for accounting and go through some of the changes there. But Kirsten, did you have anything?
Oh, I just had a comment about the definition of maintenance. But I think it sounds like you want to go through the whole thing and then we'll take up questions.
If you don't mind, I think that might be best, just for the sake of time.
Yeah, totally fine.
Methodology, again, we had some language that came in here from legal, and then also I think to try and capture some of the conversation from last time of when available, a site plan of the road or driveway shall be deferred to for determining length. That was something the board talked about last Monday. And then we changed, instead of, we changed to a passenger vehicle. I think it should be actually a motor vehicle as opposed to a passenger vehicle as defined in 23 VSA. Thank you, Brooke, for making that change. And then I think some of the other things that are in this section we talked about and actually edited during the meeting at the last meeting. Brooke, did you have something on this section that you wanted to?
I'm sorry, if you want to go through the whole thing, it's more substantive, so about this section, so.
All right, just to continue to fly on and walk through changes since last time. Next section, next page down is jurisdiction. We're added here state and town highways. And then the first sentence, legal thought we should add state highways and class 1 through 3 town highways are not reviewed under this trigger. So just being very clear that those are not subject to this level of jurisdiction. Under conversion of farm and forestry roads, again, after the last meeting, we shrunk down the language and took away a lot of the preamble and just really left it to that second paragraph. We added in under utility corridors. Utility corridors are similar to farm and forestry roads. There are exemptions for existing, but when they're converted, they can become jurisdictional. I think Jen noted that there were some shoulds in here. This is again, very draft language by legal, which we've asked at least one coordinator to more specifically weigh in on. I anticipate some language changes within this, but we did want to add in something addressing utility corridors. And then I think the last is the adoption history. So that is the very quick run through of changes since last time. We can hop back up maybe and start under definitions with questions. Thank you for Brooke for catching that one.
That was
Do
the
I-
one you were referring to, Janet? Okay.
All right, do you want to scroll back up under definitions? I think Kirsten had something under maintenance.
Yeah, so I think that we have, I know we've been talking about doing this, and I don't want to like throw any monkey wrench here, but I just want to highlight that, you know, there is a definition of maintenance, at least insofar as it pertains to work on class 4 roads undertaken by entities other than the municipality, that's quite specific. And then there's quite a bit of precedent, case law that defines what's maintenance. And even, you know, as it pertains specifically to roads. And this proposed definition, I think, is not yet anyway, fully aligned with those two other areas of reference. And so I'm a bit concerned that we may be creating potential ambiguity with some of the elements of the definition that we've come up with here. And I don't want to set the stage for, you know, added complexity. So, for example, so can you go up to the proposed, yeah. So the new definition.
That's
You go
down
down to
below.
that.
So I think
Yeah.
before we scroll down there, what I'll say, and Brooke highlighted it, is unfortunately one of the sort of challenges that we have in this is understood, Kirsten, and yet in this new portion of Title 10, we have yet another definition for maintenance here, which is why we changed this to routine maintenance, because that's what's in the new statutory language is routine maintenance. So that's one of the challenges that we have here. Brooke, I don't know if you want to say anything more on that front.
Yeah, and I've had a long conversation with one of our coordinators about this very issue, and there is concern that we should not be defining it any differently than this class 4 referenced definition of maintenance. There's concern that we're trying to define too much in advance, and because so often it depends on the factual circumstances. So for example, if we stuck to what they're indicating for class 4, if it's done by a non-municipal actor, and let me explain, I want to back up just for a minute, because the reason why we're trying to define this or call it out as being, and we want something consistent to this class 4 maintenance definition, is pertaining to the conversion of a farm or logging road. And the premise of trying to define it here is for the purposes of trying to stay as consistent as possible with the work that's done for a class 4 road that would trigger an improvement as opposed to routine maintenance, but for the conversion scenario. Because what we are doing is we're looking at conversion of farm and logging roads as a 2-step process, if you will, in terms of determining whether there's jurisdiction. What the first step is that still a farming and logging road, or has it been converted? Meaning, is there a change in use where it's also being used or being used instead for access to a development? In that instance, that is what we are looking at as the road being converted from logging or forestry to something that's accessing a development. But that's only half of the calculus. What you then need to do is, because the language of the statutes in the conversion section, let me just go to it. The conversion of a road used for farming or forestry purposes, that's one thing. And then it says that also meets the requirements of this subdivision shall constitute development. So that means once a road is converted, i.e. it's being used for not just for the logging or forestry purposes, it's accessing development. Now we get to count, did you build an 800-foot road? Part of that analysis is, have you done improvements for the purpose of accessing the development, meaning what is the physical action on the land? The construction of improvements is the basis for jurisdiction, not just a change in use, which we think is very clearly supported by the language of the statute that contemplates conversion. And then is it subject to the requirements of this, meaning have you built more than 800 feet of road or 2,000 feet of combined road and driveway? So it's really important to understand that's how we're looking at conversion of forestry or logging roads. So we were trying to find, just because you're going to use it for that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you start counting that footage. What have you done to the road? Have you improved it? That's the question that we're trying to answer for purposes of defining it. If anyone was wondering why we're trying to redefine it, and to stay as consistent as possible is the ideal. The one area that I've heard consistently of some concern, including from our coordinators, is they do not see a difference in terms of the pavement. They look at impervious surface as impervious surface generally. So that is something that we have been chatting about in terms of looking at the definition and deviating a little bit from it for the non-class 4 road situation. And let me just finish that topic by saying, I think that there are important reasons why pavement on a municipal road would be jurisdictional. You want to make sure it's done properly for the purposes of the town, of the taxpayers. Regulation is not bad. If it's not your road, it's somebody else's, we make sure we hold you to a standard. So sorry that took a while to express, but I think it's super important to understand the basis of what we're trying to create here, the consistency and also the practicality of being able to do this as easily as possible.
So Brooke, would you agree that we're going to continue to work with legal and the coordinators on this over the coming week, and we still have more massaging to do to this definition?
I think we do. And I will, while I'm talking, have the mic for a minute. I also want to raise the other issue that we discussed the last time. And that has to do with, let me find it, wait a minute. The methodology in terms of looking at a plan, a site plan versus, for example, one of the most important tools that our coordinators have identified is being able to use the Natural Resources Atlas ability to determine distances and that sort of thing. This is what was suggested to me. Requiring a plan or giving that super deference over just how they would normally figure out and look at evidence. Google Earth, whatever the tools will be. There was concern that that was not consistent with our environmental justice obligations because it felt like we were giving an advantage to someone who could afford to get a survey when that all of a sudden, is superior to other methodologies that one may not have the resources to be able to afford a plan. So in a sense, there was, just from a conceptual standpoint, being concerned about giving some sort of advantage. Instead of linear footage, it's now something on a flat piece of paper that might give
Right,
you
which
a shorter
I think-
distance.
Brooke, was counter to what we were trying to achieve, because I think what was brought up at the last meeting was we didn't want to require somebody to have to go through and do cross sections at additional cost. And so again, maybe some language to be tweaking. Jan's had her hand up for a while, so I'd like to go back to her. I think we were at definitions, and we can maybe start with where Janet would like us to start.
Under number 3, I wonder if, given the coordinator comment that impervious is impervious, whether it's paved or not, I wonder if what you want to say under 3 is application of replacement stone or gravel.
Again, I think let's leave this here, but I think we were trying to mimic the language from up above.
Yeah, though we're providing guidance to interpret that.
Right, but that specifically says that you can apply new stone.
Right.
So
New stone can be
again,
replacement. I don't
again,
know.
I
It's
think
just
we'll-
something to think about. So I'll
Yes,
just leave it at that for now. This is still under
absolutely.
discussion and yeah.
Absolutely. Alex,
Yeah, I raised the same issue last time and I second Janet's suggestion and then move on to what remains my really strong concern, that the definition of driveway and road is not the right one, not the one we should be using. I really feel like it needs to be based on how many parcels or how many principal uses, structures are being served by the access. I don't think it should be tied to whether or not the access is passing over a right of way on someone else's property or is within the tract and is entirely within the property. Roads and driveways have a common Vermonters have a common understanding of what roads and driveways are. And I think we should seek to emulate that in our guidance and not do what this definition is seeking to do. So I understand this is where Brooke, you and Sarah have been for some time and you're waiting for legal to do a full review of it. I just want you to know I'm really uncomfortable with this definition. And I've tried to explain it to each of you individually as to like examples of why I don't think it works. It's not fair in certain situations. And I acknowledge that no system is going to be without its issues, but I think that it would be more understandable and more fair if we simply moved in a different direction. And honestly, the E911 system is one that governs the naming of roads across the entire state in a relatively consistent manner. If we need a surrogate instead of this sort of definition, I would suggest exploring that, which is once you have 3 or more principal structures served by the access, that it needs to have a road name in the E911 system and effectively becomes a road. Prior to that, it's a driveway.
so Alex, understood. And Brooke, would you scroll back up to the definition that the legislature gave us in Title 10? Is so
What? What are we talking about?
under the legal standards, if you scroll back up to under the legal standards, that's sort of what construction means. And so, you know, I agree with a lot of what you just said, Alex, and I understand where you're coming at this from. However, I think what we're proposing is the best that we can do with this language that we've been given. I think where Brooke and I have had some conversations is it might be nice to come up with some proposals of alternative language if we might be able to have that considered at some point. But the language that we have here doesn't necessarily give us the ability to exempt a certain level of development because it sort of redefines development. And I'm not articulating that as well as I could, but Brooke, do you want to take a swing at that?
I totally hear Alex, and I have the same concerns. I think the problem is trying to satisfy the intent of this legislation. And my concerns are the approach that Alex is suggesting has already been determined by the court in a sense. I mean, this is a different situation, but in the 800 road rule previous law, we found, and the court even explained that the way in which it was being implemented, meaning, oh, if it's going to one house, it's a driveway. If it's going to two houses, it's a road. And so people were building 799 feet driveways, like two of them instead of one road that then, would have less fragmentation of the environment. So where we tried to work backwards from is how can we try to attain the goal of clustered development instead of the fragmented version. So I hear 911, that's a road. It becomes such a thing if there isn't, I guess, one. What about one house? I mean, the problem that we encountered was there's so many different configurations. Okay, if we say a single family home, what about if you add an accessory dwelling? Does that make it two places that you're living and all of a sudden it's a road, not a driveway? What if you have, a shared right of way that two people own, then they have to use it together, and then that's 800 feet, and then they get their shared driveway, and poof, you're already in it. Because even though maybe you're only 1,000 feet total, you've triggered it because you're sharing your road with somebody else, and it's a road. And what about a PRD that has, units that has maybe 4, apartments in this building and 4 apartments in that building? What we're trying to do is just simplify it, and we're not redefining the words and we don't have the preamble in yet, but it's for the purposes of counting the linear footage only. This is what we're going to call it, and you get 800 feet or you get 2,000 feet. It's not ideal at all. If you have other language other than sort of the conceptual conundrum that we're in, going, well, the other thing didn't work last time. We're trying to figure out something that's going to without a laundry list of every single configuration you could think of. Have at it, throw us some language, but this is really
I will. I'll
challenging.
write something. I was just trying to verbalize it over the last several meetings in the hopes that you guys would consider it and maybe think about a different option. But I'll try to write something. I would say that we're in a very different place, right? The previous road rule from 25 years ago, it was a singular number. It was 800 feet. And the statute that we have in front of us now has 2 numbers. It's spelled out. 800, 2,000 road, combined roads and driveways. So we're in a very different place now, and we must have a different standard. There must be a difference between a road and a driveway. It matters, at least in my reading of the plain language of the statute. And further, under that legal standard section, which I think we're still showing, yes. So it starts with the construction of a road or roads and any associated driveways to provide access to or within a tract of land owned or controlled by a person. The way this definition reads to me, it undermines that first sentence because it says if it's to, it's one thing, and if it's within, it's another thing, and the statute wants to cover both. Right? It doesn't matter whether the access is passing through someone else's land to access my property, and I have a right of way over that. That's, to my property, not within. The same consideration should apply in terms of how this trigger works. And the way this definition is currently structured, it doesn't. And that's really bothering me. Whereas maybe a slightly more complicated version that is focused on the number of principal structures and or dwelling units, could do that and could treat that situation the same, regardless of whether it's within or to, because the statute says it's both.
I know I've talked with you about this offline, but another way to look at it, okay, is if it's on your land, it's a driveway. If it's on somebody else's land, to get to your land, it's a road. So there might be a right of way that is my neighbor's driveway, and if I want to connect to that, I have to build a 50-foot road off of his property onto my land. Maybe I have to build an 801-foot road on his property that would trigger jurisdiction to get to my land. So it's just a way of trying to figure out how do we measure this. And I do agree that, you know what, you're going to cast a net. And you are always going to catch people that you don't want to, and you are not going to catch the other situations that you do want to. This is the fairest thing that I could conceive of, because what it does is it gives everybody 2,000 feet. And, it's like road, you might trigger it, but ultimately you get road 2,000 feet minus the road, right? And I agree. Somebody, it might take 801 feet to get to their property, but there has to be a line of demarcation somewhere. I completely agree. Now, the good news is we think that this is going to get delayed significantly and give us the opportunity to go through this, not just guidance, but to consider the rulemaking possibilities and so, it's concerning to me to come out with guidance at this point, with any kind of way in which we're conceiving it, because we have not had that opportunity for the stakeholder input, et cetera, et cetera. I wish that there were some way that we could determine, definitively how to proceed, or not how to proceed, but what's going to happen in the future, because I think that could inform what we're doing right now. We're taking our best shot at it and doing the best job we can.
So
If it's not advisable, that's why we're here trying to beat the horse, because the dead horse, because it's about testing this. Is it going to work? Does it make sense? And I appreciate everything you're saying, Alex. Really, these are tough choices and decisions to make.
I want to let Janet speak, but I think just before that, I just want to quickly add on to what you just said, Roy, which is, although I think the Senate version made it through crossover with a delay, we probably won't know for the next couple of months when that will be enacted, if it will be enacted. And we do have people that really want to make some decisions for the spring construction, summer construction, based upon our guidance. So I think where we'd like to get this to today, we'll be bringing this back next week again. We do have a few more minutes to discuss. And then I think what we are going to try and endeavor to do is to, once it's cleared legal and the board, have something that could go out for a 30-day public comment before getting it back to the board at the end of April to consider adopting, until such time we have a clear direction from the legislature. But Janet, sorry, you've been waiting patiently.
I think that this first sentence that Alex brought our attention to, well, first of all, I appreciate that you and Brooke are trying to have an elegant solution here, and it was attractive. But what Alex just raised here, I think, negates the opportunity to do that. This first sentence, the construction of a road or roads and any associated driveways to provide access to or within a tract. Your definition does not comport with that sentence anymore. And so I also, as we were talking about this, recall that way back, I'm not sure how long, when we first started talking about this, I do recall talking about single family with an accessory dwelling and duplexes as needing to be treated equally because Title 24 requires that they be treated equally. And so I think the E911 solution, Alex, might not be a solution that works, and that we have to look at the level of development that is served, not just by E911 address, because you could have multiple E911 addresses on a parcel that should be treated as single family, even though it has multiple units. And so I think before we talk about this again, that we should have legal directly address the issue that Alex has raised with regard to the elegant solution that you did propose.
Kirsten.
So I'll be quick. Alex, thank you for outlining that. I will have to give it some thought to kind of see if I think it could comport or not, but the elements of this draft that and I know I've said this once and not to sort of be too repetitive here, but I don't think we've dealt with primarily, and I remain uncomfortable with using the standard of can it be driven as the method to determine if a road or driveway exists. And I know it's been adjusted to contemplate, if there's a site plan available, look at that information. I think that there should just be one list of things that can be considered to determine if something exists. And drivability can certainly be one of those things, but I don't think it should be the thing. And I guess just quickly by way of example, I mean, my own personal property, you have about 17 acres here and a field, and we drive across it sometimes with passenger vehicles, sometimes with our tractor. And there's an area where there's like the typical sort of two-wheel, sort of ruts, right? Tend to drive that way. And then there's a little bit less rutted up to the lane that goes up to the neighbor's field. And then you can drive any direction, like all over the place. It's kind of bumpy, but I can drive all over our field in my Forester if I so choose, and once in a great while do. And that to me doesn't mean that there's a road or a driveway there. So I just putting it out there. I just don't think it's going to be like by itself a definitive tool in all cases.
Right. I don't think it was meant to be by itself. I think it was meant to be part of the equation. So maybe we'll have to clarify the wording on it. And the primarily understood that was something that there are elements of this as we trying to define it. We perhaps lock ourselves in more in terms of what Brooke was saying, maybe become overly prescriptive. But I understand absolutely your concerns, Kirsten. There are areas that we continue to struggle with. And so we'll continue to work on this. We'll continue to work with legal. And I'll just reiterate, I think what Brooke articulated, which is there's a reason why we absolutely asked for the extension, because we'd rather take our time and get it right, even if we develop guidance that we have to adopt ahead of July 1st before the legislature gives us something. I do hope that we have a chance to then take some time and revise it and continue to work on it, because we absolutely do want to get this right and recognize the complexity of these issues. So before I want to get to Annette, but Brooke, did you have anything else before I let Annette?
No, I just want to reiterate, I was never married to this particular suggestion. It was an idea, and it was thrown out to be tested and vetted to try to figure out, could this work? So I just want to say, I have no agenda to push this through. It was an option, and if we can find something better, yay. So we will continue to work on it for sure. But I do also want to say, that our coordinators are key to helping us with this as well as legal, because they are the folks on the front lines who will have to implement this. And their thoughtfulness about this and scenarios and how do we do this practically is super important. And I'm really thrilled that they've been helping us out in that regard. So.
All right. Annette, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, there's an aspect of this that I'm not clear about. I sent an example when Kirsten and Sarah first started it. It's something that happened on the property that adjoins mine. So there was an existing house on a roughly 66-acre parcel with a 1,000-foot driveway. Someone bought the parcel and subdivided it into 5 lots, one of which was the existing house, and then didn't apply to Act 250 because they put in an extension of the 1,000-foot long driveway that was 799 feet long to reach the 4 new lots. So it did not come under Act 250. So the total distance of all of the roads and driveways is less than 2,000 feet. But for the purposes of my question, is it clear in the rule that you're putting together that the driveway would convert to a road, that 1,000-foot that was existing? Or is it only the new portion that, in my example, is 799 feet that would come under this rule? In other words, I'm not sure if the driveway converts to a road or if it is the extension of the road, of the driveway, that is the road.
So
Yeah.
Annette, I think what I'd like to state back is we can talk about things in generalities, but I think where we've tried, and at the last meeting, we had a gentleman that posed to us some specific real world scenarios that we said we can't answer those specifically. Because I think that gets into jurisdictional opinions and what have you from potentially our district coordinators, and we don't want to usurp them at all.
Right, well, that already happened. And so I'm just trying to understand if a conversion of a driveway or the use of a driveway to access a development converts that driveway to a road under this definition, or if it stays a driveway and only the new part becomes a road.
Brooke, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so Annette, that's why people are so concerned about how they can make sure that we're aware of what roads or driveways exist on their property, because nothing gets converted, okay? Anything that exists. And this statute pertains to the construction of new roads, not and associated driveways. So just because somebody has a driveway on their property, it doesn't matter. The look back about what is on your property are only things that are constructed after the deadline. So let's say, in order to prevent piecemeal construction of little segments that ultimately, once you were exceeding that 2,000-foot threshold or the 800-foot for just a road, then it's triggered. But it's not that existing anything doesn't just automatically become jurisdictional. Whatever is there is there.
Okay, well, that's
Does that
helpful.
help?
I hope that it's clear in what you put out. I have one other topic that I want to mention, which came up at our select board meeting in Danby. And I know you're moving on and you have an agenda, but is there one place that you can point me to that provides the purpose of the future land use maps? Is there some document that's on the website, or, I mean, I can go hunting, but is there anything that actually states what the purpose is?
So I think Janet is looking for you.
Statute,
In the statute? Okay.
yeah, Title 24, 4348A, number 12.
And I will point out, this came up in our select board meeting looking at the future land use map, where somebody was very concerned that an entire tract of land was included as an enterprise zone. And It happens to be the land owned by Omia that is the largest underground marble quarry, but because the entire tract of land was included, it's basically all of Dorset Mountain, which is a big concern to have that be an enterprise zone. And apparently that was from input from the Land Use Review Board, where it had to be the whole parcel. And that does not sit well with people in Danby.
Actually, I think that the Land Use Review Board response questioned whether well, not the one in Danby, but the one in Pittsford, and that it shouldn't be the whole parcel. So I'm not sure that that the Land Use Review Board says that the whole parcel has to be included.
So
It
that
may have been
changed. Because I guess
no,
there's a
no.
meeting.
I'm just saying it may have been a recommended revision. It was not. I don't think it was a required revision. So
Because it wasn't in the first map, and I guess there's a meeting of the Regional Planning Commission tomorrow night to take input, and if I could report back that it is possible to get it changed back to just being the active part of the land and not be the whole parcel.
I'm going to step in here and say that Rutland Regional Planning has asked to come back to the board with questions on the 23rd.
Okay.
So I think that would probably be the best time to discuss this is they would like to come in and ask the board specifically questions. And we will also be notifying the people that have requested notification at that time when we discuss that. So I'd like to because we're getting off topic, just state that we'll tackle this on the 23rd. So
and just to clarify that there's no board rule that it has to be the whole parcel. But can we go back to what we were talking about previously? Driveways and roads that Annette raised, and the idea of converting a driveway to a road, and whether the existing driveway would count. I think, wouldn't it have to do with whether they did a bunch of road construction on that driveway to make it, to basically convert it from something that, was less than a road to a road. If it was just, a gravel, skinny one-laner, and they had to turn it into a road with 2 lanes and, a lot of engineered layers or whatever. I think that the point that Annette is raising is important to address. So I don't think we have to discuss it now, but I think that it's another sort of conversion point that the guidance needs to address.
All right, well, we are over time, and unless there's any other final thoughts on road construction jurisdiction guidance, we'll also take this up next Monday. Brooke?
Yeah, and Janet, let me just follow that up by, that is one of the reasons why we were trying to define improvement, or not improvements, but maintenance, so that the universe of improvements, which, for example, if you have a material change to a pre-existing circumstance, making that material change, improving that road, for example, going back to, for example, the Rinkers case from 1996 on Mount Irish. There was a question whether or not improving an existing road, was it improvements or was it maintenance? Because if the improvements would have triggered jurisdiction, because it would be a material change to an pre-existing development that was not under jurisdiction. So that's so what the point I want to make is, and that I was trying to make to Annette, there's no automatic, because we're using that road for a different use, automatically it's under Act 250 jurisdiction. Again, it's about the physical action on the land. We're making improvements for a purpose of accessing this new development. That's a very important premise to all of this. Nothing, there's no magic wand to say, oh, your driveway, oh, gosh, you're using that now for, to access this thing, therefore, poof, it's under jurisdiction. That is what we are not doing.
All right, so I think we're gonna wrap up roads. Unless anybody else has anything going once, going twice. We'll move on to item H, which is discussion of appeals enforcement and attorney-client memorandum. Does somebody want to consider making a motion? I see furious clicking hopefully in the background.
Right, we're all looking for our cheat sheet and all that, so I'll just go off the cuff here and make a motion to go into executive session in order to discuss pending appeals enforcement and various other attorney-client memoranda, the premature disclosure of which would substantially compromise the board's ability to function, and yes, hence the motion.
Okay. I think
I'll
Janet,
second it.
fantastic. Janet seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Hi.
Unanimous. Give me a minute to relocate and I will see you guys at executive session. And we will come back to this after we're done executive session to report out. So thank you all and we will see you shortly. All right, we're back. Do we have a motion?
Ew, Alex.
Yeah, I move that the board request the Attorney General represent the board with regard to the News Vermont case that is headed to the Vermont Supreme Court.
Can it?
Janet, you seconded?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor, please signify, wait. I think we're going to have a split vote, so I'd like to do a roll call. And if you say that you approve, you do not, or you abstain. So I will start. Sarah had, aye. Brooke,
Brooke Dingledine, I am recused from the matter, did not attend executive session, and I am not voting on the matter.
so you're abstaining.
Abstaining, sorry.
Alex,
Right.
I vote aye.
Janet,
My vote is aye.
and Kirsten.
Likewise, I am recused. I did not attend the executive session and I'm abstaining.
All right, so we have 3 ayes and 2 abstentions. The motion passes. Do we have another motion? Kirsten,
Motion to adjourn.
well, thank you.
Second.
All right, Alex seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, that one is unanimous. Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much. And we will catch you next week.
Thank you
Have a
again,
good
Sarah,
evening.
for